Hey, what's up? What's going on, YouTube? This is Jimmy with Combat and Cryptids, which is a new podcast channel that I am starting. I guess it's been probably I would say probably been going on for at least the last past year. It's been something that I've been seeing and hearing more about and stuff, and I've always I guess I tried the whole streaming and the whole gaming setup and stuff like that, but it seemed like it was too, I guess, high tech for me. So this is kind of the route that I wanted to take. It's really, I felt like over the past year I've found out about more about myself and the others around me that is going through some of these kind of similar situations and stuff. And just to kind of give everybody a little bit of a background, I am a combat veteran. Been deployed to Afghanistan a couple times, and those were probably some bad situations and bad stories that most people going through, this their daily lives and stuff haven't seen or done any of these kinds of things. So that's what I was kind of just wanted to share my story and kind of just talk about different things that I always think about and stuff, because I'm a weirdo, and some of these things that come up in my head, I'm like, do they even make sense, or is this making sense? Or when you talk to people in day to day life and stuff, a lot of people seem to shy away from these kind of situations and don't really want to talk about them for fear of people will make fun of them or make jokes about them and those kind of things. So that's kind of what I'm basing this whole thing around. And I don't know if the video thing is going to be 100% like what I'm going to do every time, or if it's going to be like maybe like once or twice I'll do it, and then maybe just do like an audio recording with that, maybe with like some clip art and stuff like that. So just kind of bear with me on the first at least 4 or 5 episodes that I put out for this. Obviously, you can see I chew tobacco, so it's kind of my pause, I guess is what you want to say. So most people have like or cuz or that's kind of like my pause to kind of get my bearings right and kind of just talk about what I want to talk about. So I was in, well, we'll not dive that deep into my personal life. We'll just kind of go through what the whole podcast and YouTube thing that I wanted to do and what it was kind of all about. So what brought all this upon me, I guess, or what made me want to do this or talk about this or even name the podcast Combat and Cryptids was I shared a story with certain people about different kind of cryptids that a lot of people know about, but most people don't know much information about them. And I don't know much information about them. I'm just going off of what experiences I've had, and then kind of what was kind of researched after that point. Not really in depth or anything like that. So I'm no expert by anybody's means, and I'm no scientist by no way am I a fucking scientist. So if there's questions or anything you guys have, I mean, I'll try and answer them as best to my ability, but it's probably not something I'm going to be like, PhD approved. It's not my forte, I guess you could say. So the definition of a cryptid is basically animals whose existence or survival is disputed or unsustained, basically. So there's not enough information out there, or enough physical information, I guess you could say, because there's stories and people talking about all these kinds of things about cryptids, and cryptids can go all the way from the Yeti, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, to the Mothman, to Dogman, all kinds of, it goes through all kinds of things at that point. But my biggest thing for me, probably, as far as cryptids and things that I've seen and stuff like that. So I'll just go ahead and start this first one off with. So I'll start it off with the Bigfoot encounter. I was born and raised in Okeechobee, Florida. Well, I was actually born in Lake Wales, Florida, but moved to Okeechobee, Florida about probably from when I was probably about 9 to about 18 when I joined the Marine Corps. So that kind of spent most of my childhood in Okeechobee, I guess you could say. And kind of my first experience, I'll kind of go through that. We'll kind of talk about that. That'll kind of be the stepping stone to all of this, I guess. And it'll kind of be, so I'll start out with the Bigfoot thing, and then maybe on next week's episode that I record, maybe I'll just go over, like my first deployment as a boot and stuff like that. And then we'll just kind of go from there and just kind of see how everything takes off. I do have 2 mics set up, so there's one here and then there's one right across from me. So I got a bunch of people that I talk to and stuff like that I hang out with. Well, I don't really hang out with. I don't have many friends, but people that I hang out with, stuff like my wife and neighbors and stuff, and people that I work with who kind of don't, either they believe in it or they haven't seen it. So it's something that they're just kind of, on the fences about these kind of things. So then I just kind of try and tell them my perspective on it, because I'm a believer to a sense until I see it, I guess is the best way to say it. I think that, kind of the whole Mothman and Dogman and skinwalkers and all that other kind of stuff. I mean, it's all pretty cool to do the research on it and talk about those kind of things, but it's not really something that I try and get too deep into, unless, of course, I know somebody who is into that kind of stuff, and then we'll just kind of research and talk about some stuff, which is kind of one of the things that I like to do, is talk about these things, because people tend to not want to talk about these things because for fear of how people are going to react to them bringing up the conversation. Like, bro, you didn't see no Bigfoot? Like, shut your ass up. You didn't, like, none of that stuff. So I just kind of try to voice my opinion on what I've seen and my experiences, and that's about the flat line for me. So, yeah. So anyways, back to, so born and raised in Okeechobee, Florida. So live there, and if you know anything about Florida, it's hot, and there's a lot of mosquitoes. There's a lot of bugs, snakes, gators, anything you can kind of fucking think of. Florida has it, and pretty much if you go to the mindset of pretty much everything out there wants to kill you. Like, there's nothing out there that's trying to be your friend. Not just like a rabbit or something, or like some grasshoppers, I guess. But for the majority of it, most things out there don't like you. And I'll try not to ramble, I guess, and go as at like 500 miles an hour, because I kind of get that way. Is if I'm saying something or talking about something, it's always at like 500 miles an hour. There's no like pause or I guess, no breaks in the conversation, and it kind of gets mundane and annoying and stuff without any like wow or so I'll try to do my best too. Then again, this is the first one, so everyone, again, just bear with me on this whole situation, because it's the first time I've talked about these things like to probably about 3 or 4 people total, but I haven't recorded any of this. So this is kind of the first time that I've ever recorded any of this, so we'll kind of just play it out and see how it goes. And if we don't get to it all, we don't get to it all, but most of the stuff I remember, so it's pretty good to, if I miss something or if I talk about something or don't mention something, then I will come back, or if anybody has questions, I'll elaborate on those subjects, or if anybody wants to talk about anything specific, I guess. So we'll start out with the whole Bigfoot thing. So me, 100% Bigfoot, I'm a believer. I haven't researched 5 years of anything on Bigfoot. This is just kind of going off my experience, and then listening to like a couple podcasts and stuff like that, but nothing too in depth to go like, oh my God, like I'm an expert on this. Like, no, not even a little bit. But I just thought it'd be something cool, because it's always something nice when you're sitting around a fire and you're drinking a couple beers with your friends and your family and stuff like that. It's just different things that just kind of pique my interest, I guess is what you want to say. So we'll start off with the first experience I had. It was in 2006. We lived in a town called Fort Drum, which is about 45 minutes away from Okeechobee. It's north of Okeechobee. And kind of the whole experience and what happened there and what happened on that night is, I was kind of a little angry at my parents. I guess I was 16 at the time, and most people don't want to, at that point in time, you're going through all these kind of hormones and all this other stuff. Your body's changing and everything like that. You're starting to experience different things and talk about different things. So you kind of regret your parents at that point. You just kind of be a rebel and you don't want to deal with any of them. So it was kind of like my escape for all of this stuff was just being out in the woods, you know. And I come from a family where both my parents are still married at this point, and we kind of go through. So I'll go through like the family, I guess, if you want to hear that. So I am the middle child of five. So I have an older brother, older sister, and two younger brothers. And basically, we would spend all of our times out in the woods. My dad hog hunted a lot. He always had us outdoors. There was no inside video games, none of this high tech stuff that all these kids are into nowadays. It was always you were always outside. My dad had probably 12 to 14 dogs that he kept outside, and we did hog hunting since I was able to walk. It was we were kind of born into that whole situation. There was no you could do other things. You couldn't focus on music or you couldn't focus on yourself. There was none of that. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. You got up. Dad got off of work. He worked night shift. He got up for early in the morning when he would get back from driving the truck. And he would basically load up about 4 dogs, and we would always just go hog hunting. That was always our normal routine. We probably did that for 10 years plus. That's all he ever did take us to do was hog hunting. So we knew the woods, and we knew kind of things that were out there and things that were kind of, I guess the good and the bad. You know, good things you're supposed to do out in the woods, bad things you're supposed to do out in the woods. That was just kind of our normal routine. So we kind of knew kind of everything that was already out there. We knew there was alligators out there. You knew there were snakes out there. And you knew that basically the whole situation when you were going outside, that you were going out there to just catch hogs. That was it. My dad would catch hogs. He'd trap them, or we'd catch them with dogs. And that was about the extent of it. We never shot them. We don't do any of that fancy stuff that anybody else does. We would just either catch them with dogs or just trap them in a pen. And that was pretty much it. So we always knew the outdoors. It was always creepy, I guess you could say. And I'm not a guy who was, at the point in time when I was around my teenage years, I wasn't really scared of the dark. There wasn't really any reason to be scared of the dark, I guess is what you could say. So when you would go outside and stuff, whether it was by yourself or with your brothers or family or anything like that, there was no reason to be scared. Like, you always heard noises outside. There was always things going on outside. It was just kind of normal how it was in Florida. So we lived out in this place. It was called Fort Drum. It was a very small town. I mean, I don't even know if there's a town hall or township, I guess you could say. It was just a small town north of Okeechobee. And we lived there, and we lived in a double wide trailer. We were very, very poor growing up. It wasn't, we weren't rich by any means, like compared to where I'm at now today. But it was just kind of like you lived or survived. That was it. And that was about as much as we knew at the point in time we were in our lives. So at the age of 16, I'm a teenager at this point, and I did have a girlfriend at this point. So she lived about a mile down the road from me. She lived, it was a hardball road that it was like a straight shot, had a couple little curves in it, but nothing too, like there wasn't any like stop signs or turns or anything. It was a straight shot. There was maybe 5 or 6 houses on this stretch of this mile road. It was a very rural town, I guess you could say. And I would say one night, it was probably around July, August time frame, I guess. And one night I got pissed at my parents about something. Now, it's probably something stupid. Maybe they told me to take out the trash or something dumb that normal kids get mad at their parents for. And I got angry, and I was like, hey, I'm just going to go outside and just go kind of just blow off some steam, I guess. Just get out of the house. I didn't want to be inside with 6 people in the house. It gets kind of packed, and no one really wants to be around each other at that point. So I was like, hey, I'm going to go outside. Well, previously before that, probably 10, 15 minutes before that, I had called my girlfriend at this point in time. I told her, I said, hey, I just want to get out of the house. I don't want to deal with my parents right now. I don't want to deal with my family. So how about me and you go down the road and we'll kind of just see each other and meet each other. We can hang out and talk and stuff like that and just go from there. Well, I go outside. I guess I don't really tell my parents where I'm going. I guess they didn't really ask. With 5 kids in the house, you don't really, if one's missing, you're not going to, freak out. You're not going to go far as you're walking out there. So you just kind of just go outside, like whatever. It's not a huge deal, I guess. So I walk down I'd say I get about halfway there. I get about half mile down the road. And keep in mind, these streets, like it's a hardball road, but there's woods everywhere. There's woods on both sides of the roads, and unless you see a house, that's about the only light that you're coming to. And I didn't have like a flashlight, I guess, to shine. I wasn't really that smart, I guess. Not the brightest kid at the point in time. But I didn't have a flashlight, didn't have a phone, nothing like that. So you're just going off of what the environment is around, like the moonlight, stuff like that. That's about the only ambient light you're getting for outside. So I get to about a half mile away. It's pitch dark, no reason to be scared, nothing. I mean, you hear stuff in the woods, but it's not nothing that's like alarming, I guess you could say. And then I get to this point where you get to the road where it kind of bends around it has a little bit of a curve to where you can't see where the road kind of continues on. You got to kind of walk a little bit. You'll see the rest of it. But I get to this point where I'm just walking down the road and I look, I guess, as I'm looking at it, on the right-hand side, I would say probably about 50 to 60 feet in front of me, there's this big, I'm talking massive. This thing must have been 7-8 feet tall. And it just looked like a huge shadow. Just like a big, massive black outline of a shadow. And I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, no, man, there's no way this is anything out here. There's nothing that big that would be that close to the road. Because, the way the hardball road works is it was hardball, and then it would be about 3 feet of grass, and then it would go off into a ditch. And then from the ditch, it would just go into thick trees. It wasn't like small trees or anything like that. It was thick trees. And it was that kind of an area. And it wasn't like somebody could just go out there with no light and just take a stroll into the woods. Like, you didn't do those kind of things. It wasn't normal for that, I guess. So then as I'm walking, you kind of just look, if you want to see something kind of better, I guess, at night, you kind of look away from what you're looking at to kind of get a better focus on your peripherals to see what it is. And as I'm getting closer to this thing, I'm probably about 30 feet away, and it looks like the outline of a person. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, this isn't a fucking person. There's no way. I've never seen anybody my entire life. Never seen anybody this tall. But I was like, man, this is kind of... And then, like when the hair on the back of your neck stands up, you're like, what the fuck is that? Like, nah, dude, there's no way it can be this. So I get a little closer, and you can start to see, like, the outline of the head, the shoulders, the arms, and everything like that. It's a massive, massive black figure. And I'm like, nah, man, I'm in complete denial. And I'm just, like, on the outside, I'm, like, trying to keep my cool, trying to, not freak out or scream or yell anything like that. Definitely running the other way, because I ain't putting my back to this now at this point. And I kind of go as far left to the road as I can without getting into the grass, because you don't want to get in the grass because then shit can hear you and stuff like that. You're making a lot of noise. You don't want to do that. So I kind of just get as far left to the hardball road as I can, and then I get about probably like 20 feet away from this thing. And then I'm like, at this point, it's like fight or flight. Like, I'm going to either A, run as fast as I can past this thing, and then hopes that it runs away from me because it's scared, because it doesn't know what the fuck it is either. Because to see somebody out there at this point in time at night is not like a normal thing. Whether that's a person and I'm another person, like, hopefully at this point it scares him. I'm thinking it's a him at this point more than it scares me, I guess. So then at this point, I run as fast as I can. I'm talking like Usain Bolt, like going bam, bam, bam as fast as I can. And I was a little fast little fucker at this point. I wouldn't, like, I'm not a fat guy, so I was, but I wasn't big by any means. I'm not. I was like 5'6", like 95 pounds at this point. So I'm a little tiny little thing at this point. and I run and I get like almost face to face. You know, you think about a 2-lane road, a hardball road. When you're that close to something and it's that big, like it's freaky. It's scary at this point, you know. So I try my damnedest and I run right past it. And as soon as I get within 3 feet of this, like the distance, like me to him, I guess, not 3 feet like close face to face, but 3 feet if somebody was standing in front of you. He's obviously like 8 feet away from me across the other side of the road. As soon as I get that close to them, this fucking thing takes off like a crazy bat out of hell. It just takes off. Boom. Gone. Hits the woods. Doesn't even skip a beat. I'm talking just breaking palmettos, branches, everything, and just takes the fuck off. And I'm like, nah, man. There ain't no way this fucking, no. I ain't never seen no fucking person run through them Florida woods like that without a light or anything like that. It reminds me of that. Like, if it was a person, I guess you would think. You ever seen that video, or not that video, that movie, what the hell's the one with the Australian dude, Crocodile Dundee, where he's walking and then the one Aborigine comes up to him and he's like, nah, I don't need a light, man, I can see great. And he starts walking and he's like, ooh, I hit the bush, like that. Like, that's what a normal person would do, you know, like, you're gonna hit shit, man. It's not like you can't just run all willy-nilly in these woods. Even if it was a path, like into the grass or into the trees, you're still gonna hit something. It's gonna be like different variations of the ground and stuff. So this thing takes off and it's fucking careening through the woods and just breaking shit and going. And I'm like, fuck that. I'm not dealing with that shit. I ain't trying to die tonight. I ain't thinking of nothing like that. So I'm just going. And then I go and I get past him and then I just keep running. It's probably the fastest half mile I've ever ran. And I get to the point where I can see somebody else walking down the side of the road and it's a normal person size. So it's not, you know, it's not a major like, oh shit, like, nah. So then I get to the point and I see it's my girlfriend at the time and she's like, oh, hey, how's it going and stuff. I had met her before she even got like an eighth of the mile away from her house. Like, that's how fast I got there. Just because I was pretty much just losing my mind at this point. So then, you know, I kind of never, you know, everybody's always like, oh, man, you didn't say anything about it. You didn't do anything about it. Man, because I didn't know what the hell it was. What the hell am I going to make up? Make up some story and be like, hey, I saw this big-ass dude running through the woods. You know, I'm only 16 at the time. And I didn't think anything about it. I didn't think it was anything. I didn't know what I saw. You know, all I know is that when I got to the point where I could see it, I knew it was big, way bigger than me. Probably about 3 or 4 of me put together. But at this point in time, I mean, I never heard of Bigfoot, never done anything with Bigfoot, never even thought about that kind of a creature or animal out inside the woods and stuff like that. So I'm like, I'm not gonna mention anything. I ain't gonna say nothing about that. Like, it ain't just, it's not like I was like, oh my god, like you know, like, nah, I ain't gonna say shit just because I want to see her fucking get eaten. Like, nah, it wasn't anything fucked up like that. But it was just, I didn't know what I saw at the point in time, so I'm not gonna bring it up, and I definitely ain't gonna say nothing to anybody about it. So then, kind of me and her, we kind of walk back, and we walk back all the way to my house and stuff like that, and never mention of it. We get past the same point in that road where I saw that thing at, and nothing. You don't hear anything. It's dead quiet. You know, in Florida at night when you're in the woods, you can hear bugs. You can hear all kinds of animals running and stuff. It was quiet. Dead, like eerily creepy quiet. Like that kind of shit that just, you're like, man, something's off here. Something's going on. But I didn't think anything of it, you know, at this point in time. I'm like, what do we do? Like, we just keep walking past it? Yep, so we just kept walking past. Boom. Get a half mile. We get to about 200 feet from my house and stuff like that. And we're like, all right. Like, at this point, I ain't trying to stay out there. I ain't trying to do nothing. I ain't trying to see nothing. I mean, I've already seen enough. I seen her. I saw whatever the fuck that was on the side of the road. So I was like, I'm out. I don't want to spend any more time outside at this point. And I'm like, I just go inside. And she walks back by herself. And, of course, everybody was like, oh, man, you didn't say nothing to her. You didn't, like, what do you want me to say? I'm 16 at the time, and this already scared the shit out of me. So I'm be like, hey, by the way, when you're walking back, be careful. There might be a big ass dude that's like 8 foot tall running through the woods. Like, she gonna be like, what the fuck? Like, she can be like, nah, you're shitting me. Like, you're joking or something stupid like that. So I didn't bring it up. Like, so, and she made it back home perfectly fine. Texted me, called me when I got home, and everything was copacetic. So, so that whole situation was just it was just unheard of for me, I guess. It was nothing that I had ever dealt with or ever seen. So it just kind of just went on the back burner, and after that, it was just kind of nothing really big at that point. So at that point, that was the first time that I ever seen something, and that was the first time that I'd ever dealt with anything like that at my time and point in my life where it was just something I didn't know what it was. I couldn't explain it. Didn't talk to anybody about it. Didn't tell anybody about it, and it was just my way of being like, did you actually see what you saw? Or was it something that you were just making up in your head? Because you're already pissed off going out there because you don't want to deal with your parents. And then you're walking outside in the middle of the night with no light. I mean, whatever you want to make up in your head is going to be what I think is, I guess, it's like, if you talk about something enough, then you kind of portray it and make it up in your head, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's how I thought at the point in time. So I'm thinking, I rationalize it, I put it in the back of my mind, and I never think anything of it. Like, at that point, me going in the woods after that, I wasn't like, oh shit, like, what if I see it again? It never dawned on me at that point to do that. So that was the first experience. And at that point, I guess you could say that I'm not a believer, but it was just something that was odd for me, I guess. It wasn't anything that I was like, oh my God, let me go do some research on this and find out what this is. No, it was just something that I saw, couldn't explain it, and just kind of left it at that. Now we will go ahead and fast forward to about a couple years later. Um, this was kind of the nail in the coffin, I guess, for me. So we didn't stay out at Fort Drum that long. We didn't, we went to the same school and stuff like that, but we kind of moved to a different area. My dad was always in transition to different jobs because he could never keep the same job, I guess. He was a very rugged and hard man to deal with, I guess. He drank a lot. He went through a lot, stuff like that. So it was just not, it was hard for him to stay at the same position just because he didn't like people. He didn't like dealing with people. And, me being 32 now, I'm the same fucking way. I try and be a little bit better and a little more understanding than he was, and I don't drink as much, damn near as much as he does. Or he did at the time. He's sober now, but at the point in time, he drank all the fucking time. So at this point, we move out to this place. It's called the Prairie. And I would say it's northwest of Okeechobee. So Fort Drum is here, where we stayed, and then up and to the west more is where the Prairie is. And basically the Prairie is just this huge thousands of acres of just land where a lot of people don't live and a lot of people don't go that often, except for like on the weekend stuff. Because it's a big like four-wheeler spot where people would always go and ride four-wheelers and stuff like that. It was always that kind of an area. And we would always just kind of go. Like, I met a couple buddies out there. One of my friends he probably lived like 2 miles away from me. We rode the same bus and went to the same school, but we didn't live close to each other by any means. We were probably within, as straight as a crow flies, it was probably 3 miles, the distance that we lived apart from each other. But he had a lot of four-wheelers. He was one of those kids who liked, his family was big into outdoors and hunting and fishing and riding four-wheelers, riding buggies, fixing up these Jeeps to make them look like they were like these crazy, outrageous things that you would see from like what the hell is that movie called? What's the movie called that where it's like futuristic and they're trying to like the areas like desolate and barren and stuff like that. Not Road Rage. What the hell's the name of the movie now? it's got fucking Mel Gibson in it, where they're trying to always just get gasoline. They're always trying to look for water and shit like that. I don't know, whatever the movie's called. But it was kind of like those kind of vehicles that we try to make up. We try to make up the most outrageous things, and it's all going somewhere. So just bear with me. All these things, everything has a meaning, I guess, or the stories have an end to them. So he would always have all these things. So he'd always have four-wheelers. So he would always come over to my house. He'd always come pick me up, drive back to his house. He had 3 or 4 four-wheelers, and another one of my buddies that lived out there too. We'd always just kind of go riding together. And we'd always do these things every single day. It didn't matter if it was school night, didn't matter if it was the weekend, whatever time. We were always hanging out. We were always messing with each other, always fucking around, doing all these kinds of things and stuff like that. And we would always be riding, just us 3, and that was it. We get to this point where it's one night. I would say it's like a Friday or a Saturday, and it's like kind of cool. You know, it's like that October weather in Florida, which is not cool at all, I guess, if you're from the north. Like I live in Ohio now, but all of these things are completely different. But the weather there it's cooling off, so it feels pretty nice at night. You know, at night it's cold where you can like start to see your breath and stuff like that in the morning. So that's how cold it is. It was like 60 degrees, I guess you could say. So we're riding four-wheelers down these trails, and we're probably 4 or 5 miles from the house, from any houses, I guess. We're all on these four-wheeler trails. We're on these back trails and stuff like that. There's a lot of cows and stuff like that. There's not, I guess, not a lot of cows, but there's cows out there in some of these spots because it butts up to right. Like you have like ranches and stuff for cattle owners and stuff, and people always lease and get these big plots of land of like 50 or 60 acres, and they fence them in and they put cows in them. But some of these places don't have gates because the cows don't go far. They don't like to trek in all these kind of woods because you got a bunch of briar bushes, and palmettos have sharp thorns on the sides of them and stuff. So there's always like a herd of like 4 or 5 cows that you might run into and stuff like that. So it was kind of normal for us to see those kind of things out there. And at one point we get to one of these turns, and the fields, I guess, out there, they're not open fields. There's always like a big area. There's probably about a 200 by 200 foot area where there's always trees. They're thick trees, then it'd be open, and then trees. They're just always just like randomly, there'll be trees and stuff. We get to the point where we turn down this one bend in this four-wheeler trail, and we turn, bam, we hit a hard right, and lights flash on one of these cow feeders, and I'm like, man, I could have swore I saw something there, dude. There was something standing behind that fucking cow feeder. It was bigger than a fucking cow. I know that for sure. So then I reverse, put the four-wheeler in reverse, not reverse like a car, but like reverse on the shifter. Reverse on the shifter, put it back, and I shine on this fucking thing. And I shit you not, this thing is 2 feet taller than these cow feeders. These cow feeders are probably 5 feet tall, I would say. They got a little roof on it, like a little house, and they just put feed in them and stuff like that. They don't get feed every day, but they have some food in them, I guess. Normally they just graze on grass. And there's this fucking thing that is standing there. Oh, and one thing, I guess, so hogs, like wild hogs, I guess you could say, is they have a distinct smell about them. A boar hog especially. A boar hog is basically a male hog, like a wild hog that's just always, like, he's always just out there to fuck shit up. He ain't out there to make friends. He's just out there to eat, and sleep and move on. That's all that he does. So in this area, so you always knew when you were around hogs and stuff like that, because you could always smell that rank, that musky smell. And anybody who's been in Florida or went hog hunt or something like that, for wild hogs, you know that smell. That distinct smell. It just smells, the smell in the air, it's always different. It just stinks like musk, like rotten, like musk. And you can start to smell that in the air. You know, just like you can smell a skunk. If somebody hits a skunk or runs it over, you can always smell that as you're driving a car down the road and stuff. So we get to that point where we turn, bam, there's something there. I back up, I'm looking at this thing, and this thing it's probably 8 feet tall. Roundabouts, 8 feet tall. This thing is massive. And it's probably 4.5 feet at the shoulders, like wide. This thing is massive. And it's just standing there, lights on it, 4 lights are on it. And it's just standing there, and it's just breathing. And it's that cool air at night that hits you when you breathe. Like if you're in the north, you know what it's like when you're cold outside. You can see your breath. You can see this thing breathing. And I don't know if the hog smell has anything to do with that, or if the hog was out there or if the hogs were out there, and that's what this thing was going. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I just know that there was a distinct boar hog smell in the area where this thing was. That's all that I know. So we're shining lights on this thing. And then by this time, both my buddies see that I stopped and turned in reverse and kind of shining my lights on this cow feeder. They whip up beside me. Bam. They stop. Now they're looking at the same exact thing that I'm looking at. And they're like, nobody said anything. Nobody was like, hey, what the is that? Or what the heck? Like, what is that? Like, no one. It was just shock and awe. There was no like normality about it. It's not something that you normally would see. And we've rode those four-wheeler trails hundreds of times at night, during the day, morning, evening. It didn't matter. We rode them all the time. We've never seen anything like this. We go out there and we got our lights on it. It felt like we were staring at this thing for fucking 30 minutes, but it was probably only 30 seconds. So we're staring at this thing. These two dudes put it in drive and they go and they take off on this four-wheeler trail. I maybe stayed like 5-10 seconds longer. Felt like I was staring at this thing for eternity. This is what it felt like to me. So then I take off, bam, and I hit the trail going as fast as I can. And I don't want to look back. I don't care what it is. I could describe every feature on this thing. It had long, long black hair. And at the edges of it, it was like a brownish, like red color. And this thing was probably the creepiest thing. Its fucking arms were abnormally longer than what normal people arms are, I guess you could say. And it was just creepy. It's like, I don't know, like the stare and the stand that this thing had was, I don't know if you've ever seen the Jurassic Park 3 movie where they're running up to the fence and all the family and they meet each other and they see each other and stuff like that. And he asked him, he's like, hey, how did you know we were here? He was like, oh, the cell phone. I heard the cell phone. And then they look back and this thing is just staring at them. This big-ass dinosaur is just staring at them, just breathing, standing there, not making a movement, not making a sound. This is what that reminded me of. It was that kind of staring and seeing that it was kind of giving us. So then they're like, nah, fuck this, we're out. So then 5 seconds later, I take off, boom, driving down these trails. Well, the four-wheeler that I was running on, which I didn't think I had explained this, but apparently I think that I do. That way everybody has an understanding. So four-wheelers have an off, on, and a reserve. And on obviously means you have gas. Off means you're not getting any gas to the four-wheeler. And reserve, a normal reserve, gives you an extra oomph to kind of get back to where you need to go to give yourself gas. Well, the gas tank on the bottom, we bypassed that completely and made its own little reservoir on the side. That basically it had like a tiny little tank. It was like a chainsaw tank, I guess you could say. And we put that valve and always had that with fuel just in case. If you ran out of fuel, you were able to switch it to that. And then you were able to get the rest of the distance that you needed to. Whether you were 2 miles away from the house, you could at least drive and get to the point where you needed to go. So I didn't know that 15 or 20 minutes before we came to this opening field, we were all sitting there, we were all chatting it up and stuff. We got out the four-wheelers, we're just talking and shooting the shit and maybe drinking a little underage beer, you know what I mean? But that was probably the most of it. And they had switched, so we always had this joke where we switch our four-wheeler gas to, and when it was on, we'd always either switch it off or to reserve, whichever one. It was always quick because you don't want anybody to notice it. So when they did that, they switched mine to reserve, which just goes off of that little tank. So the next 15 to 20 minutes, that's all that I'm riding on is this reserve small little tank. And after we stopped and we saw this thing, and we all hightail it out there, boom, we're all going. And I'm fucking cruising, going maybe 35, 40 miles an hour. And I'm thinking, if this thing is behind me, there's no way it can run that fast. There's no possible way. There's no humanly possible way this thing could be after me. I get probably maybe a quarter mile away, and the four-wheeler just dies. And just stops. And at this point in time, all the lights cut off, everything cuts off on this four-wheeler, and now at this point in my head, I'm freaking out, like terrified. And then I'm trying to like hit the button, fucking make it go and start it up. And he said, man, 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 nothing. And then I think to myself, I'm like, real quick, I'm like, oh shit. And I remember that we always played this joke. So I turned the fucking, saw it, bitch was on reserve. Little reserve tank next to it, completely slap dry empty. The tank in my four wheeler, still about halfway. So then I turn it on. I start this motherfucker up. It floods for a little bit. Bam, 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 bam. And I fucking hit it. And it starts up and I take off. Now, you know how you see like tail lights, like when you see the reflection? It maybe shows, especially in pitch dark, it shows maybe like 10 feet away from you to where you could actually see something and stuff like that. Well, this, like, I didn't want to look back. You know, it's one of those things where you just don't, like, you don't shine, you don't look back at something that you know you're scared of. Like, it's just like going, as you get closer to, like, your front door or something like that, and it's at nighttime, and you always feel like something's getting closer to you, and then by the time you get to the door, you're already freaking yourself out. That's kind of what was going through my head. So I didn't want to look back. I just took off. And we go back to my buddy's house. I showed up like 2-3 minutes after they did. And these dudes are like freaking out and stuff like that. And we're trying to talk about it, but no one's making sense. No one at that point in time was like, hey, like, what the hell did we just see? Like, no one wanted to believe it, or definitely nobody wanted to say anything about it. That's for damn sure. And it was just kind of us just not wanting to deal with it or talk about that kind of a situation, you know, and I definitely wasn't going to bring up, at this point in time, I wasn't going to bring up the first encounter that I had just about a year and a half ago. I wasn't going to bring that up. I feel like this is a bad point in time to bring it up, and my adrenaline's going and stuff like that, and I'm freaking out, and I don't want to talk about this stuff, you know. It's not something that you want to realize or think that that's out there, because we spend a lot of time out there, you know. Our families are out there. We go out there and we're out there 6-7 nights out of the week. We're just riding around doing shit. So it's not something that you want to believe or make yourself believe, I guess. So yeah, so we kind of put it on the back burner. No one talked about it. No one brought it up. No one ever said anything about it. And to this day, my two friends, I only keep in touch with one of them. I don't keep in touch with the other one. But to this day, I couldn't tell you if they'd ever brought it up, or if they told anybody about it, or if they said anything about it. Like, I couldn't tell you. It was that's just kind of the way it was, and kind of the way everybody just kind of went on about their business like nothing had happened. And we went out to those same spot. Like, it didn't stop us from going out there. We definitely didn't go alone, that's for sure. But we didn't, it was nothing that was ever brought up. It wasn't, you know, it's like you do something bad or you do something shitty and you just don't want to talk about it. You don't remember it. So that's kind of how we handled the whole situation for that. So we fast forward a little bit. So then I'm going to tell, so now at this point, so that was the first one and the second time seeing it. So now I'm going to tell, so that was in 2006 when that happened. So barring all that, there was a couple more experience stuff, but I'm not going to say those right now. We'll save those for another episode or another date. But I kind of want to go over one more encounter that my dad actually had. So I'd never talked to my dad about any of this stuff. Never brought it up, never mentioned anything to him about it. But recently, probably about, I would say, almost a month ago, I was talking to him, stuff like that, hanging out with him at his house. And I live in Ohio and they live in Florida still. And I was over there for a couple of days because mom got very sick, and she ended up passing away. So all that happened. We're doing all the funeral and stuff, normal things that you do with your parents and stuff like that. But I was out there, and my little brother, his name's Joey, and we just went out there. We went out there to bring my dad some stuff and bring in some food and stuff like that for at least the next month to kind of sustain him, because he don't like going to town. He don't like people. Still to this day, the motherfucker's 63 or 64. They still don't like people, and I don't think that's ever going to. He's trying to get better at it. He's gotten a lot better. He's a lot nicer to talk to, a lot nicer to deal with, but it's just he's not that type of person. He doesn't open up about a lot, I guess. But I wanted to share the encounter that he had, that he told me like somehow we got on the subject. He was talking about like politics and how the government's effing us over and all, just normal things that old people talk about, I guess. And I just kind of mentioned to him, I'm like, hey, Dad, like, have you ever seen or done anything or seen anything like this? Like, you're like, hey, what the fuck? Like, you don't know what it is or you don't know what's going on and stuff like that. And he brought up this story, which I thought was amazing, like crazy how it happened and stuff like that. And I thought I better talk about it before I forget it or I don't remember the whole situation or what he said and stuff like that. Because this is a kind of a secondhand account, so secondhand accounts are hard to remember because it's just like anything you do through day to day. If you don't talk about, like, if it didn't happen to you, it's kind of harder to remember those types of things. So I'd rather just bring it up and talk about it now. That way, then he's just kind of knows at least it's in recorded, and then at least what happened to him is kind of talked about. Excuse me. So he used to this man hog hunted all his life. He's 63, 64, probably up till he was about 52, 53. This man hog hunted from when he was 13 to about 50. This dude was hog hunting every single day, and always hog hunting with dogs. That was the only thing that he ever did. And he said when he was in this town it's called Indian Town, and Indian Town's another little small city in Florida that's about southeast of, actually it's probably directly east to Okeechobee. And when he was 25, he went out with his dog. So he would always just take one dog. After he get off work, he would take one dog, go out, see what he can find. And he was on this plot of land where it was kind of, back in the day it was like there wasn't as many people who owned land and stuff like that. So it wasn't really that hard to find like hog hunting spots, I guess you could say. Like how it is to find hunting spots nowadays. It's nearly impossible unless you know somebody. So when he was 25, he went out hog hunting one early morning. It was probably like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And he went out with his dog named Coper. And Coper was like always. So he always had this dog named Coper. This was the original dog that he had named Coper. And he had other Copers after that kind of reminded him of it. So he named it like Coper, like as it's going on. That's what most people do, is they name the same dog if it reminds them of it and stuff like that. So he had the original dog named Coper. He had one, and he was just a catch dog. That's all he was. He wasn't a bay dog or anything like that. He was strictly just a catch dog. And he went out, and he was going in this hunting plot, and he parked the truck on the or shell road, because in Florida most roads there are shell roads. He parked it on this shell road, and then he starts walking in the woods. They get probably gets like a mile away from the truck, and he said he had like some little shitty little tiny little light that maybe showed like 10 feet in front of him or something like that. It was like some little old Walmart light or something like that. He went. He said he started hearing hogs and stuff like that, so he goes in, lets Coper go. Coper goes in, catches this fucking hog that's probably 150, 160, pushing. Massive hog. And it was a sow. So a sow is a female hog. That's just what we call them, or what everybody calls them, I guess. And Coper catches on this sow. Bam. He gets up to her. He can just smell it. She's in heat. She's rank. She's just nasty. So he didn't have a gun, because he said at that point in time it was illegal actually to carry firearms in Florida when you were hunting. If you were just hunting, I guess, like, I don't know. I don't know the rules or regulations, but he said it was illegal to carry guns. But he always had a buck knife, and a buck knife is a pretty big knife. And he had this buck knife, and he's out there. Coper catches this sow, and he pins it down. He fucking pins it down, stabs it, and he guts it right there. That's usually what he did. You always gut the hog, especially if you're by yourself. You gut the hog. That way it's easier to carry, a little bit lighter. It takes up about 30, 40 pounds, something like that. And he takes his sow, gets Coper off, puts him on a rope, ties a rope around his waist. Bam. All right, so now Coper's kind of like leading back to the truck, because the dogs he had were always trained very well. They were very good hunting dogs. So he'll tell you this. He'll preach to the end of the day. He always bred and had dogs for hunting. That was specifically it, just hog hunting, nothing else. And he ties the rope around his waist. He throws the fucking sow on his back, and he's carrying this bloodied ass thing that's just dripping blood everywhere, and it's just nasty. And he gets up out of the reservoir and comes up, gets back to the road that leads back to the truck. He starts walking, and then off to, he said, and this is all, everything that he's telling me as I'm sitting there, and I'm like, oh fuck, like this shit's gonna get good. And he says about 200 feet behind him, off into the woods, walking parallel with him, he hears something. He hears something walking. Starts walking. He said it sounds big. It sounds pretty big to where you can hear it that far away. And he gets to it, and he gets to about 200 feet, and he's thinking. So then I guess at that point in time, my dad's thinking of everything that it could be, And there's only a couple things that it could be. It's a boar hog, which is a male hog that's smelling this sow and heat, and that's what it's coming up to. So that's his first instinct, thinking. But he looks down at Cooper, the dog, and Cooper don't want anything to do with it. He doesn't, and this dog was bred and made for hunting. Like, this thing would take on a 200-pound boar hog like it was nothing, and it would hold on for dear life. So he's walking, and Cooper's pulling him towards the truck, pulling him away from the truck, and it's just like going. And he's like, well, if this dog don't want nothing to do with it, then I definitely don't want nothing to do with it. And so they keep walking. They're walking. He's walking with the sow on his shoulders and everything like that. And then this thing is catching up to him. As fast as he's walking, this thing is catching up to him. So it gets closer and closer and closer. And then he thinks in his head, the next thing that comes up to mind is panther. All right, so Florida has panthers. I mean, I don't know how many they have nowadays, but at that point in time, I'm assuming they had more than what they have now. So he's thinking it's a panther. But in his head, as soon as he says panther, he's like, he wouldn't be able to hear that thing. Like, panthers are quiet. They hunt silent, stealth. They're out there to sneak up on things and to eat and kill. So it's not going to be rummaging through the woods like that. Like, no way. And at this point in time, he's walking. After he's knocked those two out, there's nothing else that's that big that would be approaching him that quickly, parallel to him. So then whatever it is, it gets up to him, parallel to him, and it's about 10 feet into the tree line next to him. And he goes, no, what the fuck, dude? Like, at this point in time, now he's starting to freak out. And the dog's just pulling. Doesn't want nothing to do it. He's pulling. And it just walks with him the whole time. And he gets about 400 or 500 feet where he can see the truck. And my dad always had white trucks. And he never had blue. He never had red. None of those. He had white trucks because at night, it's easier to see a white truck than it is to see any other color truck. So he can see the truck. And then when he gets closer to the truck, he had to cross this big canal. Now, canals that butt up to reservoirs are not, they're not your typical canal. They're not 5 feet, 6 feet wide. They're probably about 10 to 15 feet wide. They're shallow, but they're wide. And that's what they use for runoff and stuff like that. That's what they use for irrigation and stuff like that, for like orange groves, because oranges were a big thing, or still are a big thing in Florida, I guess. And most of the time, when you get up to these points, if you're already freaking out and you're already thinking like, what the fuck is pacing me? What's caught up to me? He had the flashlight. Didn't have a gun. All he had was a buck knife. And he said, he always told me this like every single day of my life. He said, if you're out there in the dark and you hear something but you don't see it, it ain't that close. He's like, there's no sense in shining a light on it for fear of what it could be. Like, like you don't want, like, whatever it is, it's away from you. It ain't on you. So you never want to shine a light at something you never want to see. So he never once took out his light to shine and see what the fuck it was. Which, don't blame him. I wouldn't have done it either. But he gets to this canal, and most times before you jump in canals, especially in Florida, you always shine the bank and you shine the middle of the water for gators. There's always gators in every single water place, especially in these like murky areas where a lot of people aren't at, stuff like that. There's always gators in these kind of areas. So he kind of goes, he gets up to the canal and doesn't even hesitate. Him and the dog and the hog all slide down this embankment. They get into the water. They start going. He don't even shine the light. Don't do nothing. And he shines it, and he doesn't shine the light or anything like that. He just walks straight across and starts walking. He gets about halfway across this thing, and he said he heard something, whatever the fuck it was, don't know, but it jumped in behind him into the water. And at that point, you can try and run as fast as you want, waist deep water, chest deep water, but you ain't running that fucking fast. So he's trying to run as fast as he can. His dog is pulling him, swimming across fucking as fast as he can. Usain Bolt trying to get across this fucking thing. Michael Phelps, whatever you want to call it. And he gets to the other side of the embankment, and he said he was like a damn mountain goat just climbing up this thing. And they got up there. He throws the fucking hog in, throws the dog in, starts the truck up, puts it in gear, and takes off. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, Dad, you had this experience and you never talked, like, you never mentioned any of this. But my dad's kind of like, you know, he's not one of those ones that like he never shows fear, never scared of anything. But it was just kind of just odd just to hear that story. And this only happened, this story he told me, maybe 3 weeks ago at most. So it was still fresh in his mind, or something that he could remember up to that point, and put enough into him to where he was like, nah, man, this is something right here. So, but he said he never saw what it was. He never looked back to see what it was. Never looked at the tail lights to see if anything had crossed with him, anything. But it scared him enough to where he never, after that day, he never went hog hunting in that same area again. That's how bad it scared him. Just the fear of not knowing of what the hell it was. So he told me that story, and I was like, what the fuck, dude? Like, that's crazy as shit. Like, I thought that was pretty insane. As far as the story for never hearing about it, and then the hearing of that point, and everything that I've already been through and stuff like that and seen, like, I was like, holy shit, like, this is crazy as fuck. But it was pretty crazy. So that's kind of the experience, the first experience that I kind of want to talk to you guys about. But the biggest thing, I guess, and up to this point, maybe I've heard maybe 15 to 20 different podcast episodes dealing with Bigfoot. Because, you know, that was kind of like the staple to make me want to kind of talk about these things and go over these things. So the biggest thing that I seen, or I guess the most repetitive thing that I saw in most of these podcasts was everyone who had seen or heard something or was in the scenario where they seen any kind of Bigfoot up to this point, they had some sort of traumatic event in their life. A lot of people go through trauma in their lives as kids and stuff like that. So as you're adults and stuff, you kind of try and bury that stuff and don't really talk about it that much unless you have like a spouse or something like that. But most of the time, most people don't talk about those things. And what threw me to it is I'm a believer 100% on as far as the whole Bigfoot scenarios. But other people on that episode have seen like, you know, like Dogman or like Mothman or like Skin, all these kinds of different things. But the common theme that I heard in, you know, the 10 or 15 podcasts that I'd listened to was everyone started off their story with some sort of traumatic experience, I guess. And whether it be trauma in their life from their parents, maybe they were beat too much as a kid, maybe their parents got divorced, it pushed people to the point to where they wanted to go outside and they wanted to be alone or be away from people. And a lot of these things, I feel like, and it's just my opinion, it's nothing, you know, there's no research besides what I've looked up or what I've thought through this whole process. There's nothing to definitively define any of this, but a lot of it in my eyes is a lot of people have seen these sort of cryptid creatures of some sort because of some sort of trauma or something that was going on with them that kind of made them see these things, I guess, is kind of what I'm going for. And that's what I'm trying to base this whole cryptids and combat, this whole combat cryptids, this whole thing is I'm trying to base it all off of that. And the whole reason why I'm basing it off of that is because I feel like a lot of people don't talk about those kinds of things because they're a lot more personal. And a lot of people go through trauma in their lives that make them want to escape the reality that they're in. So, you know, you work a 9 to 5, you're married, you're stressed, you've already been through trauma as a kid. And my thought process is this something that you're making in your head to make you see these things? Or is it something that you're unlocking in your brain psyche that's making you see all of these things? And that's kind of what I'm trying to base this all off. My whole experiences with everything, my childhood was rough. I mean, it was shitty. We didn't see my dad. My mom stayed home. My dad was always working. My dad drank a lot. He was kind of a dickhead to everybody and stuff. So that was kind of my reckoning for getting away from the household. Was I didn't want to deal with any of that stuff. And then with my dad's whole scenario, because that wasn't the only story that he told me. He told me a couple other ones that I was like, and those were about like aliens and stuff. Like we didn't even get into that stuff. But his whole conversation was about aliens. Like that was the biggest thing. Like he always said that he saw all these different aliens and stuff like that. But his childhood was, if I thought mine was worse, his was 10 times worse. Because it always seems like you try and do a little less that your parents did before, but you always seem to be the bad person in the scenario. So his childhood was shitty and bad. So maybe that was his kind of escape, and why he always wanted to work nights was because he knew that his home life was just so much that at night it was kind of the only thing he could do and escape all of that stuff. So that kind of pushed him to either his mind wanted that or he wanted to kind of escape that kind of lifestyle. But for me, that's, I guess, what I'm trying to base all of this off of is, are you seeing these things like because it's physically and really there? Or are you seeing these things because it's something you want to see and you want to deal with because it kind of gives you an escape from your normal life, I guess. And that's kind of what I'm basing this entire YouTube channel and these podcast videos and stuff. And I'll try and get better at some of these things and maybe go a little slower, go a little more in depth on things. But as far as the first hook to get everybody onto this is, can we kind of figure out what is going on in people's heads or their lives to make them see these things or make these believe that these things are real? Because in their eyes, 100%, they're real. They think that they've seen these things and they think that they've been around these things and stuff. And no one really believes them unless you're a believer yourself. But why are you a believer and why are they believers and why is 80% of the other population not believing in it? So that's kind of what I want to deal with and kind of talk about in all this. And there's always different things to talk about. You can talk about the cryptid part of it and you can talk about the combat part of it. People with PTSD. Like that's a lot of stuff going on with somebody's brain and somebody's mind. And a lot of veterans and stuff who have PTSD who deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, and even the older ones, Vietnam veterans and stuff like that. They all went through some sort of trauma in their lives, and whether they see ghosts or whether they see cryptids or aliens or any type of thing that's just not normal, is there a reason for it? I guess is what I want to find out, or not really find out. I guess there's not really much of an answer. There's probably somebody who's already done it. I don't know. But as far as the research I know, no one has brought it up or talked about like, hey, your experience, yeah, no, that's all cool and fine, but do you think it's because of this or because of that? Or are you just going off of what you physically saw or the mental state you were in at the point when you saw it? I guess is what I want to talk about, what I want to kind of go through and see where all this goes and stuff like that. And I'll have my wife on here, my neighbor and stuff, and we'll kind of just chat about these things. The biggest thing that I like to talk about is like the norm, to make it as normal as possible. I mean, if you're talking to a buddy about something personal and stuff like that, just a normality of like sitting across from somebody and being like, hey, what's your thought on this subject? And then they'll go over their spiel and talk about it, and then we'll break it down and talk about these things, and then we'll go from there and see how everything pans out. And then we'll record as much as we can for as long as we can. It's just a fun little hobby for me, and it gives me something to do besides drinking a beer every day when I get home from work, and we'll just see where it goes. So that is it as far as the first podcast that I'm going to start putting up on YouTube for Combat and Cryptids. So I will see all of you next time. Stay thirsty.